McHale will discuss our proposed Caledonia Act recommendations in part four. But first, be prepared to be shocked. You haven't seen anything yet. By the smoking gun evidence of corruption within the OPP and Ontario's Ministry of the Attorney General. And I wish I had all night to tell you what a privilege it has been to stand by this man's side for 4.5 years. And to his wife, Christine, who did the same, and my wife, thank you so much. Thank you. Gary McHale.
It wasn't going to be part of my presentation tonight, but since one of the gentlemen raised the issue of me assaulting Tom Kiefer, I was arrested last Thursday leaving the courthouse because Tom Kiefer and his group of radicals had swarmed the private property where we were holding a meeting. Of course, the OPP didn't do what you saw done tonight. They actually were nowhere to be found. They refused even to show up to help us. So as I ordered Tom Kiefer off the property, and he refused to leave, I naturally touched him and guided him towards the edge of the property. Instead of the OPP arresting the illegal trespassers, I'm the one facing the criminal charge, even though I had the legal right to use the property. That's Caledonia. What you've heard so far is a willful failure of the OPP to uphold the law and to honor the Charter of Rights and Freedom. It would be bad enough if the OPP just stood by and watched the innocent residents be attacked and hospitalized, but it gets far worse. When Julian Fantino, now Conservative MP for Vaughan, became the OPP Commissioner in October 2006, the OPP started a campaign of targeting non-natives who spoke out. Fantino used the full force of his office as Commissioner, both legally and illegally, to target certain law-abiding citizens. He lied to the media, he lied to the public, he lied to his officers, and he lied under oath in court. He engaged in criminal behavior, all with the repeated public support of Dalton McGuinty. Mr. Fantino and other senior OPP officers misled the public about the criminal behavior of Native protesters, covered for them by interfering in police investigations, and by supporting a cop assaulter in court. The OPP engaged in behavior to intimidate, to threaten, to harass both the elected officials and the public, and they encouraged officers to abuse the court system for motives other than to get a conviction. The OPP and the Crown's office in Cayuga united to use the criminal court system to target innocent non-natives, as well as covering for and protecting OPP officers who engaged in criminal behavior. The evidence of the OPP corruption is overwhelming, and here is just a drop in the bucket of that evidence. The idea that individual officers have some sort of discretionary authority to arrest or to intervene to stop criminal behavior done by natives is completely demonstrated to be false when you watch the following video. OPP officer Sergeant Dan McHale was in charge in Cayuga, a town 15 minutes from Caledonia, where the property owner demanded that the OPP remove Native protesters from his development. As always, the OPP refused, and Officer McHale explains why.
According to the Crown Attorney, there is no mischief being committed here yet.
Yet? What does it take to be a mischief?
Then I have to know who owns the land.
And who do you think owns the land?
I have no idea.
You do?
No, I do not, because it's under dispute. Like it would be for anybody, like your property in Binbrook. if you want to fight about the property line, I wouldn't be able to say, walk up to you and say, yeah, you can put a fence there, you can put a fence there. I couldn't do that.
Yeah, but if someone walked on my property,
If so, and
someone walked on my property, just a second.
It was
You asked-
distinguishable.
It was your
Yeah,
scenario.
yeah.
Someone walked on my property and told me I can't walk into my house that I've been living in for a couple of years.
Yeah.
You'd be right there to remove them.
and it's distinguishable as to whose property it is,
Well,
and I can prove that. Yes, you're absolutely right.
Well, that's just talk. I mean, the Attorney General argued that the natives do not have. Just a second. The Attorney General argued in 2006
Right.
at the Ippawash Inquiry. They gave over 25 court examples where natives do not have color right to be blocking or occupying disputed lands.
And when I get direction to that effect, then
Oh, I understand.
I will take
you're following orders,
I will take the appropriate action.
but you know as well as everybody else here who owns the property.
No, I don't.
Oh, sure.
I wish I did.
Oh, please. Well, who has the title deed, which is backed by the Ontario government? So if they produce the title deed, would that be sufficient? So title deed mean nothing to the OPP. I'm just asking. Someone produces the title deed.
I don't speak on behalf of the OPP on all issues in land disputes.
Well, you're a site supervisor here.
Right.
So someone produce a title deed. To you, that's not sufficient proof that they own the land.
Not for disputed property, no.
And judges keep saying
Right.
that if the natives have a dispute, they take it to court. That's what judges keep saying.
And you're asking me to resolve that dispute here at this property, and I'm not going to.
No, I'm asking you to live up to the legal documents that the Ontario government accepts.
That's not what you're asking me. You're asking
pays
me.
the property?
You're asking me to pick sides.
Who? No.
Yes,
no,
you
no.
are.
Who pays the property tax? So if they showed you a property tax deed.
Stop.
No. These are legal documents. This is the government saying this is who is the legal owner.
Mr. McHale,
Right.
I'm going to tell you right now
Okay.
that it's a disputed piece of property,
Right.
and I'm not going to make a bad decision. I'm not.
Oh, I understand that.
Okay?
But there are legal deeds. There's a property
I'm-
tax that someone's paying.
I'm sure there
There's
is.
Ontario title deed.
I'm sure there is.
Okay. And so if someone produced all these legal documents, that's not sufficient for you as an officer to decide who owns the land.
Would it still be less disputed?
Well, it's because this guy here decides to dispute with his neighbor doesn't mean he doesn't get to live in his house. That's the point you're missing. This guy can have a dispute with him. He takes it to court. What he doesn't do is go and occupy the other person's house. Commissioner Fantino was played that video in court. I had him on the stand for 2.5 days. He had to answer my questions. And he could not specify any document by which any person could use to show that the OPP, who is the legal title owner of property. So the OPP has rejected all legal documents as who is the property owner. And not only that, because they don't know who is the legal property owner, they actually threaten to arrest the legal property owners instead of the occupiers. The courts have already strongly rebuked this approach that the OPP has, and it has rebuked the McGuinty government. In one ruling regarding that very property that you saw the video on, the Superior Court judge said the same government that advises the plaintiffs not to pay extra government development fees refuses to enforce its property rights and threatens to arrest its agents if they tried to enforce their rights on their own. The court went on to say the OPP, or the police, have the right to use their discretion enforcing the enforcement of the law and private property rights. A blanket refusal to assist a property owner or a class of property owner, however, would be abuse of that right. This is the strongest wording as well. The police have no right to prevent a plaintiff from acting within their rights under Section 41 of the Criminal Code. Their warning to the plaintiffs that they would arrest anyone who is involved in a physical confrontation, regardless of the circumstance, is an abuse of power confirmed on them by Section 31 of the Criminal Code. Let's be clear what the court is saying. Everybody in Canada has the right under Section 41 of the Criminal Code to remove trespassers from property. Not only are OPP officers refusing to help property owners, which the court states is an abuse of their authority, but the OPP officers are threatening the property owners that they will be the one arrested as I was last Thursday, if they exercise their authority under Section 41 of the Criminal Code. The OPP have trained their officers to violate the law by refusing to assist property owners and also by having officers threaten the legal owners instead of the illegal occupiers. In Hagersville in 2008, another town about 10 minutes from Caledonia, a few Native protesters showed up one day to shut down a development. We videotaped 2 OPP officers helping these protesters build the barricade to stop the legal owner from using his own property. Jeff Parkinson, a Candace founder and cameraman, filed criminal charges privately against these 2 officers. The Crown immediately stepped in and did everything they could to discredit Jeff while caring nothing about the fact that the OPP willfully aided Native protesters in a criminal act. The Justice of Peace fell for the Crown's BS and refused to issue the charge. Jeff filed what's called a mandamus application in Superior Court to force the criminal charges against these 2 officers. Again, the Crown did everything they could to discredit Jeff during the application. However, on January 12, 2009, Jeff Parkinson of Candace became the first person in the history of Canada to be successful in a mandamus order to issue a criminal charge. Judge Marshall ordered both officers to face a mischief charge for aiding in the barricade. Not surprisingly, the Crown immediately stepped in and stayed the charge. In the summer of 2008, I filed criminal charges against Commissioner Fantino, Inspector Dave McLean, and Cabinet Minister Monty Quinter, who is the minister overseeing the OPP, with common nuisance for their failure to protect the public, which resulted in Sam Galtieri being seriously beaten by Native protesters. The Crown immediately stepped in and stayed the information before I presented any evidence in court. I filed a mandamus application, and Judge Marshall on July 2, 2009 ruled that the Crown had exceeded their jurisdiction and ordered a new proceeding to hear the evidence against Fantino, McLean, and Quinter. Judge Marshall stated, "The power of a private prosecutor is undoubtedly right and necessary in that it enables a citizen to bring even the police or government officials before the criminal court when the government itself is unwilling to make the first step. In my view, the right to set out before an independent judicial officer allegations such as these is not fruitless formality. Indeed, it seems to me as a bulwark of democracy." The Crown wasn't happy, so they appealed that ruling to Ontario Highest Court, and on May 14, 2010, that court ruled against the Attorney General and ruled in my favor. 2 weeks from today, on April the 8th, I am to present the evidence in court before a Superior Court judge against Fantino, McLean, and Quinter for the failure to protect this man. On a different issue, Fantino took steps to target non-natives to ensure they did not speak out against the OPP or against McGuinty. In one case, Fantino was enraged that Caledonia resident Dave Hartless, who is a Hamilton police officer, publicly called McGuinty a coward and criticized the illegal behavior of the OPP. Fantino contacted the Hamilton police chief about Hartless and stated the following: "Bad enough that he slams the men and women of the OPP, he refers to the Premier as a coward on several occasions, and then he scatters his venomous email far and wide. If this isn't conduct unbecoming, I don't know what is." Under oath, Fantino stated he never filed a complaint against Hartless, but merely was passing on information to the Hamilton police chief. However, On February 19, 2007, Hamilton Deputy Chief of Police sent Heartless an email that states, "I have now received an official complaint of discreditable conduct from the Commissioner of the OPP concerning your email dated February 17, 2007. I order you to cease and desist sending any further emails concerning the situation in Caledonia." However, Dave Heartless wasn't going to roll over and play dead for Fantino. So the deputy chief had to send a second email that stated the following: "I understand that you have brought an application to Superior Court of Justice to have my order declared unlawful. I hereby rescind my order of February 19, 2007. The Hamilton Police Service Department cleared Heartless of any wrongdoing, which I guess should raise some questions about Fantino's statement. If this isn't conduct unbecoming, then I don't know what is. What is incredible about this situation is that this complaint all started when McGuinty's senior negotiator in Caledonia started sending information about Heartless to the OPP. The political arm of the McGuinty government was using the OPP to target individuals to be silenced. Furthermore, Inspector McHale reveals that what was happening behind the scenes in one of his emails, he states that he wanted Chief Mullen, the Hamilton Chief of Police, to have the heads up in case the Minister of the Community Safety or Premier's office itself may want to phone him and talk to him about Dave Heartless. I thought that wasn't happening. The public has been told by the McGuinty government that it doesn't get involved in individual policing issues. And here we have the OPP inspector believing that McGuinty's office, or at least the minister, will actually be contacting the Hamilton Police Department. Isn't this exactly why McGuinty claimed we needed an inquiry into Ippawash? Because Mike Harris was given instructions to the OPP? But Fantino went further. Not only was he threatening or trying to silence a police officer, but he soon turned his attention to the Haldeman elected council. In an email to Mayor Traynor, who is the mayor of Haldeman County, who is with us today and will be speaking shortly, he threatened her and council and stated that they would be punished if they publicly said anything positive about me. In Fantino's email, he mentions my name 13 times, and he is outraged that Craig Rice, councillor for Caledonia, would say something positive about me. On December the 31st, 2009, Superior Court Judge Crane ordered Fantino to face a criminal charge of attempting to influence municipal officials. As he stated, this email constituted a threat under the criminal code. Not surprisingly, the Crown immediately dropped the charge. Several people filed police service complaints against Fantino because of the email. In the summer of 2007, Monty Quinter hired Rod McLeod, an outside lawyer who was only to be reported to Monty Quinter about the complaint. The Ontario Ombudsman publicly denounced this move, saying that the government was merely trying to control the investigation. Mayor Traynor testified in court the following. It was June 28th. McLeod called me in the morning. He was finalizing his report, and he wanted to go over some of the things that I had said. He said he wanted to soften the report a little bit so that the Commissioner Fantino wouldn't look so bad, and that he would call me later in the day to go over what he was quoting me to verify that it was okay with me. Meanwhile, Canadian press called me and wanted to know what my thoughts was on the fact that Minister Quinter had announced that Commissioner Fantino had been exonerated. I said, "Pardon me?" And the statement was repeated to her. I said, "But the report has not been issued yet." I then phoned Rod McLeod back and asked him, "What's going on?" I didn't think the report had been finished yet. Rod McLeod, his whole tone has changed. He actually seemed quite upset and said, "I have to write the report the way I am instructed." This is solid proof that how the McGuinty government is covering for the illegal activities of Fantino and the OPP. And this slide is an interesting final point about the email story. As Fantino found it compelling that when he sent this threatening email to Haldeman Council, he included or copied the email to these three people. Remember, there's supposed to be this arm's length between the Ontario government and Fantino. And yet he sent this threatening email to Chris Morley, who's the press secretary for Dalton McGuinty, Peter Wilkinson, McGuinty's chief of staff, and Tony Dean at the time was the deputy premier. But worse than all this is actually the details of how Mr. Fantino targeted me to be silenced and controlled. Within a few days of him becoming the commissioner in 2006, Fantino sent an email to the Ontario Director of Legal Services to ask them to find a way to deal with Gary McHale. For the next 2 weeks, government lawyers met with OPP and with Cayuga Crown lawyers to plan out a scheme to arrest me with the full knowledge I had committed no crime. So on December the 16th, 2006, as I drove to Caledonia, I was stopped on the highway by the OPP and was told that they had been waiting for me for hours along the side of the road. They informed me that if I or anyone else attempted to raise a Canadian flag, I would be arrested, and that the OPP had created a restricted area. I immediately asked the officer whether Native protesters would be arrested if they tried to put up a flag, or whether they would be arrested in this restricted area. He told me that he wasn't going to comment on that. Of course, that day, Native people did put up flags and did come and go through the restricted area. Imagine if the OPP had created areas along the highway where black people or Jewish people were arrested if they entered that area. In effect, that's what the OPP did. So as I walked down the road in Caledonia with a Canadian flag, I walked into this no white allowed zone and was immediately arrested and placed in jail overnight. Mark Vandermoss was arrested but was released a few hours later. So extraordinary was this that several OPP officers make notes and they report their concern and question their superiors about their authority to hold me in jail. But they were told that that this had been cleared with government lawyers and with the Crown in Cayuga. Their master plan was to force the court, or get the court to force travel restrictions on me in order to stop me from having any further events in Caledonia which exposed the OPP. The OPP had the support of the Crown in Cayuga, but I was arrested on a Saturday, and there is no court in Cayuga on Sunday, so the case got transferred to Hamilton. Hamilton Crown lawyer Andrew Goodman refused to follow their scheme. Once Goodman stated that the scheme was illegal, the remaining government lawyers and the Cayuga Crown suddenly changed their tune, and the OPP were left holding the bag. In the end, the court ordered my release. This didn't stop Fantino. He was angry that the Crown didn't go along with the OPP's illegal scheme. A year later, he ordered his officers to disregard the views of the Crown, as he called them timid and feeble. On December the 7th, 2007, almost a year later, I was arrested again, and this time on a bogus criminal charge that the OPP, the Crown, and the judge at my pretrial all stated they had never heard of before. The Cayuga Crown prosecuted me for 30 months, had hundreds of thousands of your taxpayers' dollars, only to stay the charge before it went to trial. The case provided a mountain of evidence that demonstrates just how corrupt the OPP has become. While the Crown tried to report to the court that they had given me full disclosure when I had 4 volumes, over the 30 months, I forced them to produce an additional 18 volumes. This disclosure includes all emails to and from Commissioner Fantino, all emails from Deputy Commissioner Chris Lewis, a few superintendents, some inspectors, notebooks and video statements from 70 different officers. The charge that they laid on me stems from a protest that we had in Caledonia. Doug Fleming organized an anti-illegal smoke shop protest And I was there merely to give moral support. But unknown to me at the time, Inspector McLean, 2 weeks prior to the rally, had ordered his officers to prepare court documents for my arrest. At the rally itself, Native protesters, in particular Clyde Pallas, were assaulting people almost immediately. Clyde assaulted at least 10 different OPP officers that day. Mr. Pallas led a gang of natives through the OPP line to swarm and attack me. Jeff Parkinson was knocked unconscious, and both him and I were taken to the hospital. Fantino was outraged, his own words, by the way, that I, the victim of the attack, caused this violence, and not Pallas, who had assaulted cops for the previous 2 years. Within minutes of the rally, Fantino had already started emailing his officers saying, at some point, McHale's got to go. Within a few hours, Fantino emailed, today we have another flare-up in Caledonia, spearheaded by McHale. All in all, but for McHale and his supporters, Caledonia would be a relatively peaceful place. That statement was made 2 months after Sam Galtieri was almost beaten to death. So much for the peaceful area, but for us. Fantino also emailed, furthermore, I want every avenue explored by which we now can bring McHale into court, seeking a court order to prevent him from continuing his agenda of inciting people to violence in Caledonia. We should be able to prove to the court that McHale's forays into Caledonia have been planned and executed for the purposes of breaching the peace. According to Fantino, I have an agenda to incite people to violence. This is what he told his officers for months, and what he told the public, to motivate his officers to find a way to arrest me. The problem is, Fantino knew it was a lie. In a separate case, which finally met at the court in December of last year, just a few months ago, Mark Van der Maas and I had filed a defamation lawsuit against Fantino because we said that he said that we had an agenda of violence when he was doing a radio interview. Fantino sent his lawyer to court to defend the case, civil court. This is what Fantino's lawyer told the court in December of, the plaintiffs have indeed, as you can see from the evidence, never advocated violence, but through demonstration, website, media, and court cases, hope to draw public attention to the issues that concern them. When the commissioner was given an opportunity on the radio to say they had an agenda of one of violence, he didn't say that. And, of course, and here's the important part, if he had, that would be completely contrary to all the evidence. And the commissioner is aware that they are not trying to actively incite violence. Mr. Fantino either just had his lawyer lie in court to cover for him in a civil lawsuit, or he's been lying to his OPP officers and the public for the past 4 years. Mr. Fantino's emails also reveal the fact that he was still upset over the fact that the Hamilton Q Crown's office didn't go along with the scheme. In one of his emails, he says, I do not want us to get sidetracked by the Crown lawyers on this, who are consistently frustrating us and only want to seek charges that they can get a prospect of conviction. In another email, Fantino says, we seem to be in an almost state of paralysis when it comes to proactively doing anything respecting McHale. If it isn't us being told what to do by feeble Crown, is our own lack of fire. It seems to me that we are reacting to the point that McHale is the orchestrated leader while we are almost captive to his nonsense. I particularly like that one. In another email, Fantino says, I believe we are falling short on exploiting every possible proactive investigative strategy that could curtail the activities of McHale. I trust we are not relying on the Crown to tell us what RGP means. There has been far too much in the past. Finally, I want us to take McHale to court to seek a court order to keep him out of Caledonia. Even if we are unsuccessful, So this is a commissioner admitting that what happens if the court disagrees? Even if we are unsuccessful, we will be able to publicly expose him for the mischief maker that he is. I do not want us to get bogged down by legal nuances. I have not seen one email that I recall where any OPP officer even remotely suggests their desire is to get a criminal conviction. Everything they do and say is to silence people, to get travel restrictions on them, to control what the public is doing. In another email from Deputy Commissioner Chris Lewis, he states, "Confidential, please. I'm with the boss at dinner tonight, and we're discussing McHale. He's inquiring about the timing of the charge. Is there not any way the charges could be laid sooner than later?" According to Fantino's own statements in court, that within the first few months, the commissioner had spent $500,000 on policing Gary McHale. For the record, that $500,000 was spent within the first few months to stop us from putting up a Canadian flag. Your taxpayers' money are hard at work. Furthermore, and it gets worse, in order for Fantino to paint me as a person with the agenda of violence, he had to deal with the fact that the videos captured Clyde Pallas assaulting cops and me. So he dealt with the issue of Clyde Pallas as a cop assaulter was quite easy. Fantino simply ordered his officers to drop the charge. When the investigating team had determined that Pallas was to be charged with assaulting a police officer, they emailed Fantino at 5 p.m. on December the 6th, 2007, and informed Fantino that Pallas would be charged with assaulting a cop. An hour later, Fantino emailed back and ordered the charge dropped. I had Fantino on the stand for 2.5 days. He could not explain why he gave the order. This is Fantino having a joke with the cop assaulter. What more, we see Fantino laughing with the person who was assaulting cops and with me, but this photo was taken by native media. And the caption to this particular photo was that Jesse Porter, who was facing criminal charges at the same time, the one who received $131,000 from the Ontario government, requested a meeting with Fantino, along with Clyde Pallas, in order to get Fantino to intervene on their behalf in their criminal charges. I don't think there's too many criminals in the province of Ontario who get to have a meeting with the highest police officer in the province for the sole purpose of getting the commissioner to intervene in the criminal justice system, but that is exactly what happened. Later, Fantino sent a letter to be used in court, blaming me for my assault and claiming Pallas was a peacemaker. Superintendent Kane wrote another letter supporting Porter and Pallas. Later, I got a Superior Court judge to order Pallas to be charged with assaulting a police officer, assault causing bodily harm, being a member of a riot, and obstructing the police officer. Once again, the Cougar Crown immediately dropped all the charges. In the same year that Porter and Pallas was charged with this serious offense, the Ontario government had paid them the $131,000 to Jesse Porter himself. In fact, many of the natives involved in the criminal behavior in Caledonia are being paid by the McGuinty government. But Fantino isn't the only OPP officer who engaged in criminal behavior in Caledonia. The current commissioner, Chris Lewis, was ordered to face a criminal charge of obstructing justice along with Superintendent Ron Gentle. Not surprisingly, the Crown immediately stayed those charges too. The charges against these two officers was based on the fact that they had sent an email between Commissioner Lewis and Superintendent Gentle, an order to the investigation team that I was to be arrested at the same time Clyde Pallas was arrested. The problem for them is that in the email, the officers admitted that the evidence against Pallas was overwhelming, while there is virtually no evidence that I had assaulted Camille Pallas. In fact, in an OPP email, it states McHale did not assault Camille Pallas. She assaulted McHale and then committed public mischief by making a false report to the police. The reason why the investigators were told to arrest me at the same time at Palace was stated in the email. They wanted to eliminate the usual issues. And the commissioner goes on to say the following: there are those who believe that charging Palace will be counterproductive. How could it be counterproductive to arrest a person who has been assaulting police officers for 2 years and had assaulted me? The answer is simple: because he's a native protester, and it might interfere with the government negotiations, and there might be a violent backlash for arresting Palace. Everything the OPP does in Caledonia, whether to lay a charge or not lay a charge, must be understood within the context of the McGuinty government trying to appease the native protesters, targeting law-abiding non-natives to appease the extremists, and allowing even cop assaulters to get off free. And 2 OPP officers were kidnapped in Caledonia, all with no charges ever filed. In another case, Brian Skye and others blocked the highway in Caledonia by laying down spike strips along the highway, cutting down logs and putting them across the road. He made a video and posted it on YouTube explaining why he had done this. The reason was clear. The OPP were arresting natives in Desirano, 3 hours away from Caledonia. For days, native protesters in Caledonia used criminal behavior to threaten the town and to force the OPP to stop making arrests in Desirano. I went to court in attempts to lay criminal charges against Brian Skye for terrorism, because that's exactly what it is. The Attorney General informed the court that he would not consent to such a charge, and therefore the court had no authority to hear the case. I could be here all night going through the emails showing you the corruption within the OPP. But I'll leave you one last good example. Brian Skye took the stand in September of last year, and he testified how he and Clyde Palace would text message the OPP, giving them commands on where they could position their officers. And he testified to the fact that the OPP obey the native protesters and how they conduct their affairs in Caledonia. Camille Palace, the one who claimed I assaulted her, also took the stand in her trial in Welland, and she testified that the only reason she filed a criminal charge against me was because the OPP repeatedly demanded that she file a charge in order for her brother to receive a deal. She even named the officer on the stand that she spoke with. The problem that's going on is that the rule of law has been destroyed. The OPP have become corrupt. The charter has been shredded, and innocent residents have been hospitalized, beaten, and suffer threats daily, and were intimidated. The OPP and the other officers covered up the criminal behavior and publicly blamed the non-natives for the violence that occurred. Our solution: the OPP has become nothing but a political police force, whereby they will do whatever the current government wants them to do. Who cares what the court rulings say, what the Constitution states, what the Charter says, or what about the rule of law? As long as the appeasement appears to work, non-native people will be sacrificed on the altar of political correctness. The solution to Caledonia isn't the replacement of an MP or an MPP, or even the replacement of a political government. But the problem is inherent in both the PC party and the Liberal Party. The mere fact that Stephen Harper, a law and order person, could pick Fantino to be an MP after all that he has done shows you the problem is widespread. So the solution is, or our solution is, that the system must empower private citizens to hold the government accountable. We call upon both the province and the federal government to make clear changes to the law in the following areas. They need to strengthen the Police Service Act to ensure police officers actually have to uphold the law. They should limit the authority of the Crown to stop prosecutions. They need to strengthen private prosecutions to ensure that people, average people, can hold government officials accountable. And finally, they must make it a criminal offense to violate someone's civil rights. That's what they had to do in the States. That's how they solved it. It is only when police and governments are afraid of the power of the people that the rule of law will be upheld and the end of the violence will occur. Thank you for listening. I will now introduce you to Jeff Parkinson, one